Prajwal has come. Prajwal is back? Yeah. Very good.
Hello, Swami.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the continuation of the discussion on the foundational texts of Indian philosophy. This meeting will be recorded. It will be posted on YouTube. So if you have missed any of the previous discussions, you may find it on YouTube. Also, there will be a question and answer segment at the end of the discussion session. If you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask. If you are not speaking, please mute yourselves in order to minimize the disturbances. Also, please use the raise hand feature of Zoom in order to maintain the queue while asking questions. Thank you very much.
Recording in progress.
So thank you, Prajwal. Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupine avatar varisthaya ramakrishnaya te namaha. We are discussing the philosophy of Madhvacharya, the system of Dvaita Siddhanta, called dualistic philosophy. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, one of the most foundational doctrine is this concept of eternal and lasting difference between everything in this world, between many different things and God and this world, and also the fundamental differences among different living beings and even among different things in the empirical world. So it's all the conceivable differences. If you have got a triangle on the top, we have God, and on one side the world, the other side living beings, human beings, and so on. You cannot think of more than 5 fundamental differences. That's what here means. It's called Panchabheda Siddhanta, the doctrine of 5 differences. Jiveshwara bhida chaiva, jadeshwara bhida tatha, jiveshwara bhido midaschaiva, jada jiva bhida tatha. Midascha jada bhedoya, pravancho bheda panchaka. Bheda panchaka means 5 types of differences. Soyam satyuvanadischa shadische nasamapnuya. Anyway, this is a fundamental doctrine. They frequently quote this doctrine of eternal fundamental difference between everything. Now we are going to discuss that important tenet. What does he mean by this difference, and why this difference is eternal? So there are some very interesting ideas that Madhva has put forward to defend his concept of the fundamental difference. He says no living beings can be non-different. They are essentially and what you call intrinsically different, which he call anadi surupa yogyada bheda. It's a very important term they use in Madhva philosophy literature. The fundamental intrinsic difference among jivas. It is almost like original sin. So surprisingly, you find something very interesting between Madhvacharya and Augustine, Saint Augustine. This difference is as intrinsic, as inherent as Saint Augustine's original sin. Now, of course, and he even doesn't spare Ramanujacharya. See, Ramanuja does not accept this lasting, fundamental, intrinsic difference. Because he says, in all of us, there is the spark of the divine, Antaryami, indweller. God is present in all of us as a spiritual spark. That is what he is. He is an indweller, Antaryami. So there is some kind of a similarity or identity, and also there is a difference. God alone has got all these auspicious qualities and powers, potencies, creating this world, sustaining this world, listening to your prayers, preservation, all these are special characteristics of God, Vishnu and Narayana. But at the same time, there is some kind of an identity. Through spiritual practice, you can live, you can go right up to the close proximity with God. So, Salokya, Sarupya, Salokya, I mean, you can get the same form, you can dwell in the same higher level of consciousness, same world as God. You can also have Sayujya. At the same time, you won't have complete identity. So there is an element of similarity, and also there is an element of dissimilarity. Difference and also identity. Identity and difference. Both together. You can find in Ramanuja's philosophy. It is called Visishta Advaita. It is Advaita, the conditioned Advaita. Visishta Advaita. Now, Madhvacharya did not spare Ramanuja to conceive of this kind of little similarity or identity with God. For him it's a blasphemy. As much as for many traditional Catholic Christians, For example, if you say you are the same as Christ, you are same as God, that's a great blasphemy. So Madhvacharya, in fact, interestingly, Madhvacharya flourished in the 13th century in the West Coast. And he had absolutely no knowledge of any non-Indian religious traditions because there is no interaction. But still, there were attempts, not absolutely successful attempts to portray the Madhvacharya got some of his teachings from the Portuguese missionaries who were around, some Christian preachers, the Portuguese. In fact, the Portuguese Advent was only in around to the end of 15th century, 1497 or 93. Around that time only Vasco da Gama reached India. But long before that, there were some missionaries who have come to India from Syria and other places, so they were active. But this only an attempt to make out that Madhva system bears the influence of Christian influence. It is absolutely unhistorical. It is not at all historically corroborated. But anyway, it's an interesting thing. But this idea, which is called Anadi Surupa Yogyada Bheda. So he says, why are different living beings so different from each other? Not because of karma. Karma alone cannot explain the difference. There is something deeper than that. And that's where the fundamental intrinsic difference. And that difference is eternal. Right from the beginning, this difference is there. So, in fact, in one of the well-known books of Madhva tradition, it's called Nyaya Sutha. It's a gloss or a minor commentary on a book written by Madhvacharya. And the book is a commentary on Brahma Sutras, Badarayana Sutras. The book is called Nyaya Sudha. And the author of this Nyaya Sudha is Jayatirtha. He is a very prolific writer, scholar, coming in the tradition of Madhvacharya. He is one of those who built the philosophical foundation of Madhva system, Jayatirtha. And he wrote this well-known book, Nyaya Sudha. It's called Tika. Tika means a gloss, a minor commentary, like footnotes, written on the commentary of Madhvacharya on Brahma Sutra. So Madhvacharya's commentary on Brahma Sutra. It is called Anuvyakyanam. Madhva's commentary on Brahma Sutra. Of course, he has written another commentary also, Anuvyakyanam. And Jayatirtha, who followed Madhva tradition, Madhva means related to Madhva. It is Sanskrit. Madhva means related to Madhva. Madhva Siddhanta means the philosophy of Madhvacharya. Siddhanta means a philosophical school. So the book is called Nyaya Sutha. And there, this is a well-known statement which frequently quoted in books and also in commentaries. So I am quoting from Nyaya Sutha. Yet Purusha Bahutvam Sankhena Angikutam. Now, you know, Sankhya philosophy, we used to discuss Sankhya philosophy when we were discussing Gaudapada Karika in a well-known book on Dvaita Siddhanta, written by Gaudapada, who actually a predecessor, who preceded Shankaracharya, one of the most well-known books belonging to the pre-Shankarite period on Advaita Siddhanta, Advaita philosophy. So there he, of course, he refutes Sankhya system. Sankhya system is another pluralistic school, another school of pluralism, means the idea that there are many or more than one absolute realities. It's called pluralism in Indian tradition. Dualism or pluralism means a system of philosophy which say that there is more than one absolute eternal reality. In Shankaracharya's books, whenever we refer to the word dualism, Dvaita, he is not referring to Madhvacharya, because Madhvacharya was born 400 years after Shankaracharya's passing away. So Madhva belongs to the early 13th century, and Shankara passed away in 810 AD. So it has been almost for 500 years. So we are talking about Dvaita system, dualism or pluralism. But this term was originally used during the early centuries, during the time of Shankaracharya and others, to refer to Sankhya philosophy, which posits two absolute fundamental realities, Purusha and Prakriti. So it is called pluralism or it's called dualism. So here, Jayatirtha is referring to an important statement in Nyaya Sutha. Yet Purusha Bahutvam Sankhyan Angikritam. Sankhya philosophers do accept the idea that there are more than one Purusha. So Purusha and Prakriti are two fundamental realities, and they say that there are several Purushas. Prakriti is the one cause from which the entire world evolves. Purushas are many. Tadabi Mayavadibhihi abhyupagatameva. Abhyupagatameva. So they also, the Mayavadi mean, here the word Mayavadin, the word is used, is a reference to Advaitins. And you have to remember, and these are important things to remember. So Madhva begins by giving a totally wrong interpretation and implication to Advaita. Advaita is not Mayavada. Advaita is Brahmavada. The Brahma Satyam, that's a fundamental doctrine of Advaita. The absolute reality is one, eternal, universal reality. The source of the universe, with the sustaining principle behind the universe and the point of dissolution of the universe. Jagat Mithya is another term that comes after Brahma Satyam. Jagat Mithya means that what about this world? For that Shankaracharya says it is Mithya. What does it mean? This world is there. It is Mithya. What do you mean by Mithya? It is not the absolute reality. It is a changing reality. It comes and goes. It changes. So it is called Mithya. Now, Madhvacharya, instead of calling Advaita as Brahmavada, he calls it Mayavada. That's an important thing to remember. So, calling you by another name and scolding you calling you by another name. And criticizing you, this name is not good, your name is very bad. But that's not my name. But it doesn't listen to that. No, this is the name which I have decided to call you. And you misinterpret that name of yours, So that's why, yet Purushabhagutvam Sankhyan Angikritam Tadabi Mayavadibhi Abhyupagatameva. Of course, this comes from Jayatirtha. Natu Swarupe Kaschidasti Parasparato Visheshataha. So, Swarupe Kaschidasti Parasparato Visheshaha. Paraspara Vishesha means they are different from each other. Among themselves there is mutual difference. That means every jiva in this world, every soul in this world is eternally, fundamentally different and distinct from each other. Now, of course, this may be explained in two different ways. One way to explain, which Madhvacharya doesn't accept, is due to karma phala. See, you have a lot of good inherited karmas. So you have a good life, you have good experiences. Another person may have different kinds of the baggage of karmas. So that person is different from you. So difference can be explained in terms of the difference of accumulated karmas. There are three types of karmas: Sanjita karma, Prarabdha karma and Agamiya karma. A big stock of accumulated karmas. Karmas here means karma phala. Karma means the effect of karma, the results of the consequences of our actions in the past. These days, number of books are being written on reincarnation and rebirth stories. People suddenly, a child suddenly showing up some, revealing certain things belonging to another person who died years ago, and then finally the child is able to, he identifies himself to be the reincarnation or rebirth of that dead person who passed away long ago. You can find such stories. So the child has got the memories fresh in his mind, coming from previous life cycles. So you can find, parapsychology is all day. There are many interesting things happening around in this world right now. The point is, so that means one way of interpreting is you are different because your karmas are different. Your actions in the past are different from the actions of another person from whom you find a lot of difference in this life. So difference can be explained in terms of different karmas. Madhvacharya is no. He says no. Natu Swarupe Kaschidasti Parasparado Vishesha. Swarupa means by the very intrinsic nature, by its very essential nature, fundamentally or intrinsically. There's a difference between you and another person. And that difference is natural because it's an essential difference, intrinsic difference, in their very nature, in their very constitution. And it can only be explained in terms of some fundamental difference between anadi, which is eternal. It always there. It began there. And in this context, of course, Madhvacharya says Ramanuja is not entirely correct, because Ramanuja, of course, doesn't admit, he refuses to admit there is any basic distinction, because Ramanuja is an exponent of what may be called Swarupa Vishesha. Swarup we call it Vishishtaikyam. So Ramanuja is Vishishtaikyam. Not Swarupa, but Vishishtaikyam. Vishishtaikyam means there is an identity and oneness, but it is qualified, it is conditioned. Not like Advaita. Advaita is called Swarupaikyam. By the very nature, you are one with Brahman. That is Advaita. You are one with Brahman only in a conditioned manner. That is qualified with Visishta Advaita. But Madhvacharya says, no, you are non-different from Brahman, And you are not different from every other living being. You are not different from every other living thing, every other phenomenal, empirical things in this world. And this is called Sarupa Vishesha. Means Vishesha means the distinction. It is Sarupa, it is by its very nature, intrinsic. By very nature, you are different from each other. It's almost like saying a golden necklace is eternally, fundamentally, intrinsically different from a golden necklace. And the Dvaitin's explanation is they are used for different purposes, they have different forms, different names, so they are intrinsically, fundamentally, essentially different. Ramanuja says that different and also they are identical. They are identical because there is the same gold within. At the same time, they are different. So, it is called Sarupa Vishesha. That is the principle of the philosophy of Madhvacharya. So, Vishishta, Vishesha, Ramana. Vishishta means difference, but it is conditioned. Unity, conditioned. So, remember, in that case, Ramanuja system contains an element of unity and an element of distinction. Madhvacharya system is fundamentally distinct, absolutely no identity, no similarity. Shankaracharya says it is intrinsically non-different. That is Surupa Aikyam. But very in Surupa, but its very nature, it is identical, it is one same. Now, elaborating this idea, of course, there are other important things in this context. In this context, sometimes, elaborating this, you can see very often Madhva commentators develop this Siddhanta, the Bheda Siddhanta, which is called, this fundamental difference. We call Anadi Surupa Yogyada Bheda. Bheda means different, distinction, difference. Anadi means it has no beginning, eternal. Surupa Yogyada. Bheda means it is different from the real thing. And it is itself, by its very nature, its very Surupa, by its very nature, from as an intrinsic quality, it is different and distinct. Now, in this context, there are some important statements coming from some other writers. Madhvacharya himself writes in strong language. It's called Anuvyakyanam. Anuvyakyanam is the book on which Jayatirtha wrote a tika or gloss called this Nyaya Sudha. So, yadi anadi vishesho na sampradam katamishyate adhishtadeva cha adhishtam svikritam sarvavadibhihi akasmigo visheshaschet adhishte kvachidishyate sarvatra akasmigatvam syad na adhishtabekshida kvachit adhishta chet visheshoyam anadittam kudo natat. So, the idea is very simple. This unique experience state of being totally different from the absolute reality, from Brahman, it is not without a strong foundation. It is at the very beginning, it is there. That distinction, the difference is always there. Here you find some of the later writers, they try to develop this into something like Augustine's original sin dogma of original sin. From the very creation itself, every human being was born by his very nature, by the very temperament, he is essentially different from every other human being. So even if he tries to become equal to another person, it is impossible. That's because Surupa Bheda means Bheda or distinction, difference by its very nature. And there are many statements I can just quote from some of the well-known books. Of course, Madhvacharya himself writes in Brahma Sutra Bhashya, he says, Pratibimbana mitho vaichitre karanamaha. Well, what is the explanation for this fundamental difference? So, according to Madhvacharya, it is vidya, karma, etc. Many things. He says, anadi vidya karma vaichitriyat vaichitriyam. Vaichitriyam means distinction, mutual distinction and difference. What's the real cause for this? Adhishthanayamat iti. The fundamental difference. What is that? Anadi, avidya, karma, vaichitriyat vaichitriyam. That means total rejection of the idea that in every living being there is the presence of the divine. It cannot be. Because any kind of unity and oneness of different living beings in this world, or the human beings or the empirical objects, if you want to really establish even a remote possibility of unity and oneness and identity, it is possible only at the spiritual level. Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam is one of the doctrines taught and repeated again and again in Brahma Sutra, in the Mahabharata. Udara Charidanam tu Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam means for the broad-minded, the world is one spiritual family. For those who are not broad-minded, this is mine, that is yours. I am Nija Parovedi. That means I am Nija Parovedi. This is mine, this is you, that's I. This is mine, that's yours. Ganana Lekhuchedasam. Gana means this kind of attitude. That's yours, this is mine. I am different from you and you are different from me. This idea of fundamental distinction difference is Ganana Lekhuchedasa, Mahabharata says. It is only for the small-minded. Udara Charidanam tu. On the other hand, those who are highly evolved, spiritually, culturally evolved, our way of analyzing and understanding this apparent distinction difference changes. See, after all, on the surface, you can see everyone is different from everyone else. There is no real unity. That's true. Even the 5 fingers in our hands are different from each other. Everything is different. There is no absolute total similarity or identity at the empirical level, the physical level. That's true. But we should go beyond the physical, beyond the empirical. And then you find similarity at the level of emotions and feelings. Many people together work for a higher cause. It is not unity and oneness at the physical level, unity and oneness at the ideological level, the philosophical level, at the level of a higher principle. You can find many people come together for a higher cause. And at that level you find there may be some unity and oneness. But at the spiritual level, there is perfect unity. So when Advaitins talk about Swarupa Aikyam, the fundamental, natural, intrinsic unity and oneness of existence, they are not talking about unity and oneness at the physical level. They are talking about the unity and oneness at the higher spiritual level. That's why Mahabharata says, Udara Charidanaptu. Udara here means broad-minded. In the spiritual sense, it means those who are highly evolved spiritually, for them Vasudha eva Kudumbakam. Vasudha means this earth, means humanity is one family. So, Madhvacharya is maybe taking an entirely different perspective. He says, Pradibimbanam mitho vaichitre karanamaha adhishthanayamaditi anadi vidya karma vaichitriyath vaichitriam. So, this distinction, this fundamental distinction or difference is entirely based on this intrinsic difference in nature. So, this is a very, very important point, remember. On the other hand, Advaitins tell you the distinction is there, that's true, at the empirical level, physical level. But physical, empirical things are not eternal, they are called vyavaharika, means they are relative. Advaitins do not say that this world is non-existent. No, they don't say that. They say the world is not absolutely existing, in the sense the world doesn't remain the same in the past, present and future. So that interpretation of permanence or absoluteness is also not accepted by non-Advaitic philosophers like Madhvacharya. That's all we have to remember. So very often, remember their epistemological or hermeneutic categories in understanding also is one in that is different, and this difference also is part of the explanation for the difference in the philosophical conclusions. The hermeneutics is different. The way of interpreting different terms is different, and also some of the epistemological tools they employ are also different. More important is the difference in the hermeneutics. For Advaitins, we should remember again and again, Advaitin says what is real in the absolute sense should remain the same without a change in the past, present and future. If it is changing, it doesn't make it absolutely unreal, but it is not absolutely real because it is changing. This is an important thing to remember. Now that, and what is changing is again, it is given another status, ontological status. The ontological status given to the relative, the changing entity is called vyavaharika satta. Vyavahara means practical utility. We live in this world, everything we use it on a chair. But chair is not an absolute reality, because this chair won't have the same shape and size after 1,000 years, after 10,000 years. It will be something different. So in that sense, all these things are mithya, all these things are relative, all these things are non-absolute. Now that way of interpreting or employing the hermeneutical tools is not acceptable to Madhvacharya. So we have to remember, when you go deeper, you understand this. They are understanding it from different perspective and giving it different meaning, and then say the argument. So, of course, in normal argument, if you are arguing in a court or law, then both the parties should come to an agreement, at least they refer to the same law book. So the terms have identical meaning and implications according to all the lawyers. Otherwise, you cannot have an argument. But that is not here in this context. So when we try to understand the philosophical systems, very often this is not very well understood, especially when we understand through translations alone. You have to remember, Madhvacharya dualist system is an entirely different way of using the tools of hermeneutics. And Advaitins have a different tool. For them, Advaitins, they divide satta or reality into three levels: the absolute, the relative, and the conceptual. The Paramarthika, the Vyavaharika, and the Pratibhasika. So, when you understand Vyavaharika, you cancel the Pratibhasika. When you understand Paramarthika, you cancel Vyavaharika. I shall try to explain this before going further. Again, you have to use the old analogy of a rope mistaken to be a snake. The snake is only conceptual reality. In the sense, it is a product of your intellect or mind because of memory. You have the memory in your mind of having seen a snake somewhere, and you superimpose that memory on the object lying in front of you, which is actually a rope, but is apparently it's got the shape and color of a snake. So you superimpose. But the snake itself is only a product of your imagination assisted by memory. But the rope is not absolute reality. The rope is part of the empirical world. Rope is a relative entity. It's not Brahman. So it is Vyavaharika. So when you realize it is a rope, the conceptual reality is gone. You understand it is Vyavaharika. And after several years of meditation, spiritual practice, when you become a knower of Brahman, then you realize this rope and everything else in this world is only Vyavaharika. So, a Jivan Mukta, liberated soul, who is always in communion with Brahman at that mystical level, Samadhi level, he doesn't see the Vyavaharika, the relative. He is only looking at the Paramarthya Brahman. But that doesn't remain for long all the time. Mostly we are living in the relative world of empirical level, at the Vyavaharika level. Now, this distinction, dividing reality into these three levels, is not accepted by either Ramanuja, Madhva, or any other Vedantis. This should be understood carefully. That's why he says, he uses the word Mayavadi. Means, that's a very important thing to remember. Those who don't study this from traditional, those who study Dvaita from a traditional teacher, and Madhva from a teacher, the point is, Shankaracharya is not talking about what Madhva is talking about. Shankaracharya says the world is not there all the time. After 10,000 years, this chair will not be there. This cup will not be there. But Madhvacharya says, no, Advaitins say, this cup is not there. The chair is not there. The world is not there. I am not here. So, this sort of this point, it is something funny, which we kept in mind. This is an important thing to remember. That's why Pratibimbanam Mitho Vaichitri Karanamaha, Madhvacharya writes in Brahma Sutra Bhashya, Adhishta Nimat iti anadi vidyakarma vaichitriyat vaichitriyam. Plurality, distinction. It is due to anadi vidyakarma vaichitriyam. Means distinctions in terms of karma, vidya, whatever you understand. And this again is inborn, intrinsic, natural. And one of the lesser known writers in Madhva tradition produced large number of saints and philosophers and dialecticians and great scholars who wrote great polemical works. So he was Raghavendra Tirtha. Often he is known as Raghavendra Tirtha Mantralaya. He was born in that place. He was a great saint also. So he writes, Surupobadhi Vaichitrisya iva adhishtanema padena abhiprayatatvat vivrutameva chantrikayam. So he says, now, this is a very, very original interpretation in Madhva system, especially from Brahma Sutra. That is, Sarupavadi Vajityamiva Adhishtam Padena Abhiprayadat. So by the very nature, the essential point is this, the fundamental difference is intrinsic. You are born, it's an inborn difference between you and Brahman. This idea behind. Everything in this world is different from everything else. So all the conceivable 5 types of differences are implied here. Now, just one more, this difference, of course this is again interpreted differently, of course. He says, Jiveshwara Bhida. So, here, Brahman is not implied here, because according to Madhvacharya, his Brahman is Saguna Brahman, that is Vishnu. So, Jiva and Ishvara, every living being is essentially different from God. Now, how is a living being eternally different? Because a living being carries with him this liability or this inborn burden of never being equal with God. So that fundamental principle of Swarupa Bheda is very similar in a way to the doctrine of original sin in Augustinian theology. Jadeshwara Bhita. Again, everything in this world, in this empirical world, mountains, trees, valleys, nature, all are essentially different from God. Jiva Bheda. Again, among different living beings, there is this fundamental difference. And also, between the empirical entities and living and jivas, there is difference. And among different empirical entities in the world, there is this difference, which he calls it Veda Panchakaha. Now, one impact of Madhva philosophy, this emphasis on the fundamental, eternal difference, evolves that frequently it is interpreted as some kind of a dogmatic religious or religious theology. Now, to understand its position in Vedanta, we should know how Advaitins established their own concept of Swarupa Aikyam. How did they deal with this problem of plurality? Of course, I told earlier Avidya, etc. Those of you who are interested, from a Western perspective, some Western scholars have tried to analyze the evolution of Godhead from the Rigveda Samhita. Remember, this is an entirely a Western methodology at play here, and it has its own value, its own it has its own merit. Max Muller, while trying to find out the evolution of Godhead in Rigveda Samhita, he tried to analyze this in the light of 5 different levels of evolution of Godhead. One is pantheism, pantheism, polytheism, monotheism, monism. Okay, that means pantheism means there are statements in Rigvedas and also in the Upanishads which actually are openly pantheistic. Much more so in Rigveda Samhita, and also all Samhita portions of Vedas you can find. Less on Upanishads, but more on Samhita portions. This world itself is an expression of the divine. And then sometimes there are statements which show that there is one supreme reality as the underlying principle in everything, in all phenomenal things in this world. It's called pantheism. And then there are also verses which depict a goddess or god as the controlling, regulating principle of different empirical things, rivers, mountains, valleys, and so on. So Marut, Varuna, Indra, Mitra, Agni, all these are examples. Agni is fire god, Varuna is is the divine principle, divine entity, the God behind the waters. Then there is, of course, there is a God for seasons, the Vayu, the air, and so on, Indra, and so on. All these gods and different entities. This is called polytheism. In monotheism, you find there is the depiction of one supreme reality, a created God, very similar to Abrahamic traditions. Now the point is, all these concepts were harmonized in Advaita. This harmonization did not take place in Madhva tradition. That's the main difference to keep in mind. In Shankaracharya's tradition, all these Vedic deities of Vedic pantheon were harmonized and well coordinated. And the original exponent of Advaita, Shankaracharya, did it in two different ways. One method was to establish a way of worship and certain denominations. Worshipping Divine Mother, for example, in the Yajurveda you find there is the Medha, Saraswati, all these ideas are there. And in the Rigveda Samhita you find Indra Suktam, Varuna Suktam, Pavamana Suktam, all these different hymns are there, addressed to different deities. And then some of these deities are no more seen or heard in temples. But what he did, he evolved 5 important deities by harmonizing all the entire Vedic pantheon. So, Aditya, Ambikam, Vishnu, Gananatham, Makeshwaram, Panja Yajna Paronityam, Grihastha Pancha Pujayet. What happened was, he said, well, some of these suktas can be organized, and then he established this concept of worshipping one god, Aditya, and then all the divine archetypal deities were organized, harmonized, and Ambika, the god as the mother, divine mother, and then Vishnu, and then Ganesha, and Shiva. Now, that sort of things did not happen in Madhva Siddhanta. That's because both Madhvacharya and Ramanuja gave importance to non-Upanishadic concepts also. But Shankara's system, Advaita, is based on Upanishads alone. But in the Upanishads also, there are statements which can be called Vishtadvaitic, supporting Ramanuja system, and also Madhva system. But that was interpreted as a state of spiritual experience, as a penultimate state before you reach Advaitic experience. This is an idea. I can explain this in the light of one interesting incident in Sri Ramakrishna's life. Sri Ramakrishna was being taught Advaita sadhana by Totapuri. He is Advaitin teacher. And Sri Ramakrishna was practicing meditation, prayer, puja all his life. His life was entirely immersed in spiritual contemplation. So he was asked to meditate upon the Supreme Brahman. But Sri Ramakrishna tried his best, but he could not transcend to go beyond the level of God conceived as the Divine Mother. And finally, Totapuri asked him to take a piece of glass, and he himself took a piece of glass and pierced and asked Sri Ramakrishna to meditate on Bhrumadhya, on the forehead. At that time, Sri Ramakrishna could go beyond, transcend the level of monotheistic, or what you call saguna, or the idea of God with the form idea. I mean, God conceived as a Divine Mother. Now, Sri Ramakrishna did not reject it, he transcended it, went beyond that, the transcending is what happens in Advaita. And this can happen only if you hold on to the Upanishadic tradition. Because there is no scope for this kind of harmonization in non-Vedic religious literature prevailing at that time. Madhvacharya gave equal importance to Mahabharata. And also Rigveda Samhita. Ramanujacharya also gave equal importance to the ancient religious teachings of Nalayara Prabandham, Alvars and all that. They are all highly evolved spiritual seekers and devotees, no doubt. But the Upanishads, when you come to Upanishads, you can find the scope. In the same Upanishads, you can find the highest teachings of Advaita. At some levels, you find Visitadvaita and Dvaita. So if you interpret the Upanishads, if you focus on the Upanishads as a central source of the teachings, then you can harmonize. You can harmonize pantheism, pantheism, polytheism, monotheism and monism under one umbrella, Advaita. That's why Advaita does not say that Madhvacharya's Dvaita is wrong. No. And Advaita does not say that Ramanuja's Visitadvaita is wrong. What it says is, beyond that level, without rejecting the idea of God with form, which is the central teachings of Ramanuja and Madhva, without rejecting, accommodating, it can be beyond that. That is what is called Surupaikyam. So, essentially, intrinsically, there is a unity and oneness between Brahman and Jiva. Jivo Brahmaiva Napara. Again, at that transcendental level only. But at other times, you can see the difference. See, only when you break the 1,000 mud pots, then only when you see these 1,000 mud pots going back to the original form, the mud, then only you realize it is actually came from mud only. Before you made these 1,000 pots, it was mud. You break it, goes back to mud. When you are using these 1,000 mud pots for different purposes, they are different. So they are different, fully understood. But they are not intrinsically different. They are only relatively different. So the intrinsic and the relative, that distinction is not well recognized in non-Advaitic systems. That's why you find what is relative is interpreted as absolute by Madhvacharya. That's why there is a difference between a necklace and a ring, both made of gold. So Shankaracharya say, well, okay, that is true. There is a difference. You don't wear a ring on your neck, in your neck. You don't wear a necklace on your finger. You don't do that. There is a vyavaharika difference is there. That's only vyavaharika. Vyavaharika is not paramarthika. The relative is not absolute. The relative is only relative. So what you find is there is this accommodation and harmonization of the relative and absolute and the conceptual realities in Advaita. On the other hand, in Madhva system, what you find is there is a projection of the relative as the absolute. That's the point here. So I think I will continue in the next week, but I wanted to create a background for a proper understanding of these systems of philosophy. We should always remember they are all great saints. But when we read those books, when we read their philosophic systems, you find they were right from their own standpoint. All these systems were absolutely right, can be fully justified. The only point is, at the highest level, unity is there. In spiritual life also, there is a gradual progression from many to one, from without to within, from gross to subtle, from outside to inner. There is always a difference. As we evolve further, we don't reject the other ideas, we only go beyond them. That's the idea. So thank you, you can ask the question. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj. David, your hand is up first.
Hello, Swami.
Yeah.
I have a question about, I understand in the Dvaita,
Yeah.
one realizes one's true nature. With Vishishta Dvaita, one realizes the essence,
Yeah.
the similarity between God and self. In Madhva's system, what is God realization? What is there to realize if we're so completely separate and different? What is realization in his system?
Yeah, when you, by the grace of God, you get the same experience as Ramanuja says. You feel you are blessed. You go to Vishnu Loka. You go to the world in which God is residing. So very similar to the concept of going to the kingdom of heaven, kingdom of God in the Christian tradition. Very similar to that. Very similar. So grace also plays a very important role in Madhva's. Grace also plays an important role. God's grace is important. But the only difference is there are certain people who are highly evolved. By birth they are highly evolved. There are those who can evolve further and reach the highest, and there are also those who live in a state of total condemnation. They can never make any progress any time. The Nitya Naraga Siddhanta, the doctrine of eternal damnation, is a speciality of Madhva system.
In Christianity, though, there's the concept of the Holy Spirit being within each individual. So it seems like in Christianity it's more Vishishta Dvaita in the sense that...
You're right. Yes. But the grace of God, that's common to both Ramanuja and Madhva both. But you are right, Ramanuja's system in many ways is similar. It's more of a theological system. All that's there. Yeah. But I think the Holy Spirit within you, but can they say that God is within you? Of course, there are biblical statements, you and Father are the same and all that, kingdom of heaven is within you. That's true. So there is true, actually, you are right. There is a close similarity between the approaches of both Ramanuja and Christian divines. If you read the life of a man like Spinoza, a typical God who was a typical devotee who was immersed in God's consciousness, very similar to some of the concepts of devotees in the Ramanuja system, you can find similarity. Please continue. Somebody asked a question. Please.
Oh, Maharaj, I was just jumping in to say that the statement, the kingdom of God is within you, is in the Gospel of Thomas, which was suppressed.
Yeah,
it's not
of course.
Not one of the synoptic Gospels because it was controversial to the traditional teachings.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But they do have the concept of the triune, God, the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost. So they do have that.
No, they don't have it. No.
In Christianity,
Trinity, no. That kind of, it's not that. Of course, a typical Ramanujite will focus on worshipping one aspect of Vishnu, no doubt. But at the doctrinal level, they don't have anything. They don't have something very similar to the Holy Trinity. No, I don't think. No.
So what in Madhva's system, what goes to heaven? What aspect of being human? What goes to heaven? Like in Christianity, it's the Holy Spirit goes to heaven. But in Madhva's system, is the body going to heaven? What does he think?
According to their system, they believe that at the time of death you of course, you die, then you get a kind of special divine form you get. Some kind of a divine form and divine aspect, and you go to Vishnu Loka, living things. So, very similar to some of the concepts in the Mahabharata and also in the Puranas. See, Madhvacharya himself is claimed to be an incarnation of Hanuman during the time of Ramayana, and Bhima, one of the Pandavas in the Mahabharata. So there is already Rama. So Madhvacharya gives a lot of importance to the Puranas. So you can see the influence of Puranas and non-Upanishadic sources both in the teachings of Ramanuja and Madhva. In Shankara's system, to understand one, you should know the other. In Shankara's system, he primarily focuses on the Upanishads. He talks about Iti Srutehi, means Iti. Sruti means Veda, he means only Upanishads. He refers to other sources, but his primary source of verbal testimony is Upanishads. And the Upanishads, he gives lots of importance to those statements signifying the unity and oneness. There are also other statements he refers to, but then they are given as referring to a state of experience before you reach the highest. So nothing is denied. That's the idea behind.
Thank you, Swami. That clarifies it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Maharaj. Guruji, you're next, followed by Sanjay.
Yeah.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Swami, as I understand Madhva philosophy, there are three types of individuals.
Yeah.
Mukta Yoga, Nitya Naraki, and Nitya Samsari.
Yeah.
And these are like, the first group is the only group which is eligible to go to attain moksha. And the second two groups, the third group is Nitya Samsari and Nitya Naraki, which are like completely in argument, eternal condemnation. And Nitya Samsari like keep going back. So are these all dependent on Swarupa's nature of the individual, that Dharmapala? So
No,
nothing that you do
really,
in this life is going to change.
There is another category. There is a higher category, Lakshmi. There is another Lakshmi and Nitya. There is Nitya Muktas. In fact, they are always in that highest in Lakshmi, and then there are some great devotees of Purana literature, the Nitya Muktas. They never get bound. And then ordinary sadhakas, ordinary devotees called those who live born with good samskaras. Then there are ordinary samsaris who do good things, make some progress, not enough, come back and again making more and more progress. The Nitya Samsari and Nitya Naraki. So there is a difference of opinion regarding this, whether they are the same or different. So Nitya Narakis are like the Ravana, all these demons, mostly characters from the Puranic literature or Mahabharata and so on, Ramayana. Demons who are always fighting against God and so on. They are never get liberated. Nitya Samsari is sometimes they are identified as Nitya Naraki. Nitya, that is called those who are doomed to live in hell all the time. So there is a difference of opinion whether Nitya Samsari, Nitya Naraki are the same or not. But then there is one important category, Samsaris, ordinary sadhakas. They may not be sadhakas even, they may be ordinary people living in this world. Such people also, when they happen to do some seva, some service, some good karmas, slowly they evolve and they keep ascending to a higher and higher level. That is those who live in the samsara. But Nitya Naraka Vasana, Nitya Naraka Siddhanta, I mean the doctrine of eternal damnation, they are, that's a place where all the demons, all the evil characters you hear about, you read about in Puranic literature or Mahabharata, Ramayana, they are all living there all the time. That's the idea behind. And actually there is a Purva Paksha, I mean the form of a different opinion. What about some demons who were also meditating on Shiva, Bhasmasura, or they were not worshipping Vishnu. So they considered that they are also not going to heaven because they are not worshipping Vishnu. So that kind of obsession with one aspect, a speciality of, because they are not worshipping Vishnu, they are worshipping Shiva. There are statements and which we don't want to refer to, but fortunately they are only verbal for conflicts. Don't do beyond that. I mean, condemning those who are worshipping gods other than Vishnu. But remember, that sort of thing doesn't exist anymore in India. We are only referring to some old books now. I am introducing those books. Actually, when we talk about these mutual conflicts, that doesn't exist in India right now. Or many of the traditional Vaishnavas, those born in Madhva tradition, they go to Shiva temple. And they're the same family, they're worshipping Shiva. That kind of that polarity, I mean, that kind of lopsided approach is no more found anywhere in India, of course. Frequently in some temple disputes they may emerge, but very, very rare. Okay? We are just referring to some old books. We should keep in mind these things, many of these things don't exist in Indian society right now. You find in the Bay Area, you find many of those who are born in Madhva families are flocking to Shiva temple, Shiva Vishnu temple. They go to Shiva temple, they also Vishnu temple also they go. No problem. But it's actually only at the philosophical level. I am just trying to introduce some of these ancient teachings, especially the Sanskrit statements, to the modern audience. That's all. Okay, thank you for the question. Yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead, Sanjay.
Well, it's in continuation of the previous questions. In a Nitya Naraki or Nitya Samsari, how does that soul evolve after rebirth? Is there a chance, the Madhva philosophy say that after many births as you do, you have the opportunity to get the moksha. Is there do they describe that or you're done forever, that's so?
Yeah. Unfortunately, with regard to Nitya Naraki, there is no scope for any progress. So that is actually very strange. In fact, I did talk to some of the Swamis who were, in fact, my predecessor, Swami Prabodhanandaji, who actually was a Madhva family, but he had nothing to do with their philosophy. He was asking, I don't know where he got this idea. He was referring to Madhva. From where Madhva got this idea of eternal damnation? Prabodhanandaji is wondering. So as I mentioned earlier, most of the cultured, educated, spiritually oriented people in modern times, they don't share any of these ideas. Absolutely never. They feel very embarrassed if you confront them with these concepts. Many of them don't know, of course, So remember, we are just referring to some old ideas. So I wanted to, because many of these teachings are not well known to modern audience, so I wanted to give sample. When you're talking about Advaita, everybody is very happy. When you talk about Madhvacharya system, there are certain aspects which may not be very pleasant. Still, we should be ready to put up with that. Even none of them, you don't find any fanatics among them right now. Never. They go to all temples, they support everything. I told you, many of those who come to Shiva temples, many of them are from Madhva tradition. They don't know that Madhvacharya says such things. So, I am just introducing some of these teachings. We should not look beyond that. Okay, thank you. Please continue.
Maharaj, how do they interpret that Arjuna's question to Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, that all the good work I have done and all the will that be gone when I die? I think that's the kind of question Arjuna asked Krishna, all the thing.
Yeah.
Then Krishna says that yes, it will, all the good things you have done will be carried on to next birth.
Yeah.
How does the Madhvacharya philosophers interpret that
section of Bhagavad Gita.
So, ayadi saddhayopedu yoga chalidamanasaka aprapya yoga samsiddhim kam gadim Krishna gachati. In the 6th chapter, Arjuna is asking this question. So, partha naiveha namutra vinasas tasya vididi nahi kalyana kaschid durgadim tada gachati. So, the answer is, look here, those who have done some spiritual service, they never, those things will never go in vain, they will always get this benefit, and then continue, tatratam buddhi samyogam levate pavodehim, etc. He continues. So, the point is, Madhva system is not very emphatic on either way, in these interpretations. They are not very emphatic. They'll always, as I mentioned, they'll always emphasize, Arjuna doesn't belong to that category. Arjuna is among the highly evolved souls. That's why he got this good fortune to be instructed by Krishna. So this question doesn't arise in the context of Arjuna. Arjuna was a highly evolved person. So remember, he had a doubt, he wanted to be clarified. So then remember, anyone who is fit to be doomed for all times, he is not likely to put a question to Krishna like that. He is not likely to meet him either. So remember that. So that question is not very relevant. So important thing. Okay?
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah.
Maharaj, I have a question
Yeah.
about the historical timeline, the influence of, you referenced the influence of missionaries from Christian world on the west coast of India, and their notion of God above and humankind below, and acting as servants of the
Yeah.
Lord. And, in Western tradition, that does play out with some hermeneutical differences between the Jewish predecessors and the later Christian movement.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to understand the timeline. Maybe it's not an absolute thing. Maybe it's just a subtle, imprecise influence that starts to take hold in the post-Shankarite world as the Christian missionaries start to aggregate.
Yeah.
How does that really work in your understanding?
Yeah. So one point is, Madhvacharya lived in 13th century. So he was living in the west coast, maybe from modern Kuntapura right up to Kasargod state. Maybe this is the means, including Udupi was the place where he was born, precisely except Udupi. The point is, there were no missionaries as such. Missionaries started operating only from 16th century AD onwards, because missionaries, especially Catholic missionaries, started working only after the Portuguese advent. And I think Vasco da Gama reached India in 1497, and Columbus reached here in 1493. So you can see the 4 years difference. So Vasco da Gama reached India in 1497, I think. And Madhvacharya had already passed away in the early 1300s. So they were Christians. And where were they? They were at least 500 miles away from Madhvacharya's birthplace. They were Syrian Christians. And they never preached. They were not missionaries. They were the Syrian Christians. If you believe the legend, they came in around 51-52 AD. They were further south, somewhere in Kerala. That's 500 kilometers further south of the place where Madhvacharya was living. And he didn't go about preaching to those places. And they were never went about preaching, Syrian Christians. They were living almost, in some way, they were living like the desert fathers. Not entirely, but very, very, very secluded, very non-proselytizing type of people they were. Syrian Christians. Even we tried to get one of them to come here and talk in Olima Memorial Interfaith program. They didn't want to come because they don't go about propagating the teaching. They won't do that. So the chances are almost nil that Madhvacharya could have ever met any of them. Almost never. I think there was never any attempt. It's very important.
Well, that early on was quite early in the Christian movement, and they were not full of proselytizing zeal.
No,
at that
no,
point.
absolutely no. In fact, proselytization started only with Portuguese advent. That too, really, the Portuguese began very active as missionaries in Goa. That's about 500 kilometers north of Madhvacharya's place. So, and again, Madhvacharya would not have talked to them. He would understand their language. They would understand more his language, I think. We're talking about those times. Portuguese were mostly they came for trade. They pleaded with local kings for permission to start a factory. They wanted to store these pepper and spices which they wanted to sell into European countries. That's what the purpose of their coming. Of course, they also started some places. They started proselytization, but much late. There's no way Madhvacharya could have ever had any treatment with them. This is very important to remember. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
I'm looking for. I don't see questions online or any other hands raised.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll ask another question.
Yeah.
There is something that tracks throughout spiritual life that has to do with some, I wouldn't say abdication of independence, but I would say some reining in of the unbridled ego. And so there's a tendency, I think, when you look at the scope of history, there is a tendency to go into Madhvacharya's direction just because it doesn't necessarily take full responsibility for one's autonomous spiritual life.
Yeah.
And those of us who are, devoted students of the Dvaita Vedanta, we kind of take a checkered look at that, as though there's something incomplete about it. But there's also the notion of this being another form of vairagya, and I'm wondering whether or not there's room for that too.
No, you are right. Of course, there's a tendency. But in modern times, let's say, hypothetically asking this question. Just imagine Swami Vivekananda coming in the late 19th century. Can you imagine Vivekananda giving a lecture on Madhva Siddhanta in the Chicago Parliament of Religions? Not even Ramanuja system.
Wouldn't work that well.
And it's not that Madhvacharya system contains a lot of great spiritual truths, but to be effective, to be well received, to make sense to those people, Vivekananda had to say something universal, something which includes an appreciation of all that is great in Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Abrahamic traditions, which were heavily represented in the Parliament religion, fully showing his appreciation for all the sublime teachings. Still something beyond all that. Still acceptable to all of them, still going beyond all that. That's what Vivekananda gave to Americans. Suppose he had preached Ramanuja system here, they would have thought, we have our own Christianity, the church, that's wonderful, fine. And also, when you talk about God, can you imagine Vivekananda talking to Americans about eternal damnation? There are people who never just imagine. Even Christians, even I think there is a school of Calvinists, maybe I don't know, maybe there are some who come very close, but not very close to Madhva's concept of eternal damnation. I don't think the people would have been impressed by that kind of a doctrine. They were looking for something universal, something that opens your mind, more sublime, that can help you to move forward in your spiritual life. So remember, so Vivekananda brought here a kind of a modern interpretation of Advaita philosophy, because it accepted all other systems, still shows something beyond all that. But you can all come together and you're all right. And so the platform where you can say you're all right is higher than any of these systems independently taken, And that's why all these people appreciate it.
You also have mentioned that historically there were groups like the Theosophical Societies that had made fertile soil for these universal ideals to be readily accepted.
They took little bit from everywhere. So there is something universal here. You are right. They created a real platform for Vivekananda's advent. So
Sanjay, I see your hand is up. Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Maharaj, my question is, what, if any, is the value of the Madhva philosophy in the spiritual evolution of various people? We are all at different stages of evolution after many births. As much as I subscribe to the Dvaitic philosophy, that's the experience, but Vishishtadvaita gives a path. The Prapatti is a great concept. Even though Vishnu, the more you go into but you also recognize the same divinity exists in all the human beings. So it is more about meeting the needs of the mind still, to some extent. Now, what, if any, in your opinion, is the value of the Madhva philosophy for...
Historically, it shows an important stage in the post-Shankarite intellectual world's response to Advaita. So, because many of the post-Shankarite Advaitins started giving a very dialectical interpretation of Advaita, even emphasizing that the world is unreal, not emphasizing Brahmasatyam, but emphasizing Jagat Mithya, and also in a very dogmatic, life-negating, world-negating fashion. So Madhva was a natural response to that sort of overemphasis on the so-called world negation, which is actually not part of Advaita. Which again is a diversion from real Advaita. So that prompted a response like this. So historically it has a significance. Think of Martin Luther. But I have respect for Martin Luther as a human being, but Martin Luther plays an important role. It has the correcting impact on the Catholic Church. But the mysticism, the poetry, all the great things, all the, so Catholic Church embodied many of the great things about Jesus Christ, no doubt about it. But when you deny the possibility of somebody going beyond the empirical level, reaching a mystical level of spiritual evolution, he denied it. His sainthood was totally denied. So, of course, so you cannot really consider as something very happy episode, happy development. So Madhvacharya has an importance, no doubt about it. But it's again the language in the Madhva dialectics. Sometimes they use certain words which Shankaracharya would not have used. Even Ramanujacharya would not have used. So there's a lot of muscular dynamism about it. I think it's a natural response. It's nothing important. It has an importance, Actually, Chaitanya system is real. It's linked to Madhva system. They try to deny that fact, but in reality, Chaitanya system is a continuation of Madhva system. But they do a lot of great work.
Maharaj, is there a possibility? I'm looking, maybe my view is the Madhva philosophy or even Chaitanya, they try to establish some kind of yama niyamas.
Yeah, true. Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Even I have great respect for those who go about shouting Hare Rama, Hare Krishna in the streets of New York. After all, they are not shouting anything terrible. They are shouting some holy names, mantras, which are found, roots are found in the Bhagavata Purana, and they are not doing any harm to anyone. They say Krishna is the only God. They say that's all fine. That's all. So remember, and that's a link to Madhvacharya system. They are not doing anything harmful to anyone. And actually they are purifying the air. The subtle tanmatras, the air is purified by them. So they are wonderful. They are doing great work actually. I only imagine when I read the newspapers and the social media what is happening in Europe today, if only they could be replaced by ISKCON people shouting Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, how wonderful it will be. Eh? UK, Germany, Italy, all these countries will be very peaceful if they could replace these protesters, I don't want to mention who, with the ISKCON people shouting Hare Rama, Hare Krishna. Okay? So you can imagine. Wishful thinking perhaps. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think Bobby Coleman is smiling, a great enthusiasm. It's a fact. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah, thank you. So, Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. Namaskar.
Recording stopped.
Yeah, namaskar.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you.